going to make a career change. Let me think, resume, LinkedIn, the strategy piece of it. And while that's really important, it's really important to first get grounded within yourself. Yoga really helps us get into the present moment, using the breath, using our body to notice where our mind is.
Career change is one of the most rejection-full arenas. When I was going through my own career changes, interviewing and applying to jobs, you're constantly being rejected.
Job search adjacent to maybe dating, right? You're putting yourself out there. You're going for something that's maybe outside your comfort zone that you want. And so it's a very vulnerable process, right? And I think you're spot on. I think oftentimes we can see rejection and we turn it into a story about our identity, about our worth.
Welcome to Speak Arizona, the podcast for professionals ready to elevate their communication and leadership skills. Whether you're speaking to a crowd or leading a team, you'll get practical tips, expert insights, and inspiring stories. Join us as we dive into the craft of powerful communication and authentic leadership. Speak Arizona is powered by District 3 Toastmasters. Subscribe and take the next step to becoming the speaker and leader you want to be. Welcome to Speak Arizona, a podcast dedicated to empowering you to find your voice. Hi, I'm your host, Rupesh. I help technical experts upgrade from being the smartest person in the room to the most influential, one conversation at a time. Our guest today is Caitlin Magidson, a psychotherapist and career coach. We met at a yoga studio while I was training to become an instructor. Yoga is all about awareness, noticing what's happening in your body, in your mind, and your breath. I've seen how powerful that same awareness can be when people are navigating career change, getting on that public speaking stage, or difficult conversations at work and at home. In today's episode, we're going to explore the overlap between self-awareness, communication, and career changes, and how these internal narratives shape how we show up. Drawing from Caitlin's work in psychotherapy and career coaching, we'll talk about fear, identity, values, and what it really takes to communicate clearly and move forward in your career from the inside out. Caitlin, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you, Rupesh. It's just a delight already to be here with you. I'm excited for our conversation.
Thank you. Well, do you mind giving a little introduction of yourself and your background?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, we met here in Arizona, but I'm originally from the DC, Maryland area. I got my master's in mental health counseling from Johns Hopkins, which is in Maryland. And I also worked at the business school at Hopkins for over 7 years as a career coach, working with MBAs, other master's level students, as they were pivoting with new education into different industries, into new job functions. So I love kind of merging the space of mental health, the psychology, what's happening inside us, as we are also trying to create strategy to move towards career goals, life goals that we all have to up-level and grow.
And as we're recording this is the beginning of the year, often time for reflection, big changes, thinking about what's new. So I'm really excited to have you talk about some of these topics.
Yeah. It's a good time. A lot of people start thinking about who do I want to be? What's my next chapter, right? And I think the New Year's is kind of this natural time to think about what else do I want to create in my life?
Yes. As I mentioned in the intro, we met at the yoga studio while I was working on becoming a yoga instructor. And yoga is all about connecting these different parts of yourself, your physical body, your mental mind, your spirit, all about being present and aware in the moment. Can you talk about, Caitlin, this concept of mindfulness and how it shows up in your work as a career coach and a psychotherapist and what's important for you in those areas?
Yeah, sure. Well, I love that we met through yoga because it's a shared interest and passion. I think the practice of yoga is so powerful in practicing being present. And that really is what mindfulness is, right? It's not right or wrong if our mind goes to the future or goes to the past, but when we notice that our mind is somewhere else other than the present, then oftentimes we can experience anxiety when we're too future oriented, or maybe even sense of low mood, depression, regret if our minds are in the past. So I think yoga really helps us get into the present moment using the breath, using our body to notice where our mind is with compassion to bring it to the present. And that's where a lot of, I think, a sense of safety and peace can be. And I notice in people who are changing careers, obviously you're thinking about the future, and that can bring on some anxiety. There's unknown, and that's not a bad thing, but also recognizing I need to bring myself back to this moment, because in this moment I am safe. I can take one step at a time, right? And so we can feel more empowered and grounded and regulated when we recognize what is instead of the what if that could happen in the process of change.
And career change is one of the most rejection-full, if you maybe want to look at it from that perspective, arenas. When I was going through my own career changes, interviewing and applying to jobs, you're constantly being rejected. And then in my particular case, I take those rejections, well, I know now, as like a measure of my self-worth. And I know that I shouldn't do that, but I do. So it's just one of those things.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think it's really normal. I mean, I think job search adjacent to maybe dating, right? You're putting yourself out there. You're going for something that's maybe outside your comfort zone that you want. And so it's a very vulnerable process, right? And I think you're spot on. I think oftentimes we can see rejection and we turn it into a story about our identity, about our worth. I'm not good enough. No one wants me. I'm not skilled, right? And so we have to pay attention to the stories that we tell ourselves and that we believe into, because I think, 99% of it really is mindset. Certainly there's strategy, but we have to, teach our minds to be resilient and to form, stories that really serve us in moving forward. Okay, that was a moment in time, but that didn't define me, right? And I think that's a lot of the work that I get to do in private practice as I work with clients, both in coaching and then also in therapy. I have them as separate services, and also do coaching within organizations with leaders and presentations on mindfulness and mental health topics. So I think it's just part of the human condition and experience. We're all working on our mindset and internal world.
Yes. And it's funny because in my career, I've interacted with a lot of people going through career change and myself. And I always think about what I tell them when they're going through these things. Like, you don't need to be accepted to all the jobs. You just need one. Like, maybe that wasn't the right fit. Don't worry about it. And it's funny about thinking about turning those stories around on yourself when you're going through that. How would you communicate to a friend or someone else? So I think you've taught me that as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a lot of Brene Brown's work about, talk to yourself the way you would to a friend that you really care about and love, right? So even just this concept of communication, it's not only how do we express ourselves outwardly, but how do we express ourselves internally to ourselves? What's the story I tell myself about myself when I mess up a line during a speech, or, I make a mistake in an email? That totally impacts your nervous system and how you show up and if you continue to take steps forward.
And the other reason I wanted to start this conversation about mindfulness and presence and awareness is not only that we met during yoga, but I'm a part of your career design program, and you start every session with a mindfulness moment where we've gone through a couple of exercises. So I've really appreciated that. And to me, it was so unexpected, because I was thinking we're going to be thinking strategically or tactically. We're going to work on LinkedIn or resumes. But every session we spend the beginning working on mindfulness. And so can you talk a little bit about that and how building that self-awareness really helps with the rest of the process? Because I think most people, I certainly skip that step.
Yeah. I think it's easy, and I think it's normal to think, oh, okay, I'm going to make a career change. Let me think resume, LinkedIn, the strategy piece of it. And while that's really important, it's really important to first get grounded within yourself and feel like you're safe inside, right? That you are feeling resourced. You're not feeling like you're in this place of scarcity, that you have this kind of abundance mindset. So using the breath, we've done some reflection exercises in that group, can just help you get settled and stay connected to your core. I think a lot of time, and we've recently been talking about values in the career design group that's running for 10 weeks. It helps us to reconnect to who we are and what we want, and not just the external goal, right? And I think, in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, he talks a lot about tying habits to identity. Not about just like losing weight, but my identity is I'm a person who takes care of my body. And that's why I show up to the gym, right? So when we're talking about career change, it's not just like, certainly you maybe want to get a raise and you have specific concrete goals, but also thinking about who you're becoming and getting tied and rooted into that can be a really empowered place to move towards your goals from.
Yeah, this is a bit of a digression, but one of my epiphanies, I'm not so anti-New Year's resolution, I think, as many people. I've gone back and forth. But one of my epiphanies from this year was all around self-esteem and self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And going through yoga, I've always been relatively healthy, but when I went through the yoga teacher training program, I went to the next level of working out, doing yoga like 16 hours plus a week. It was really intense. And I started noticing changes in my body, positive changes, that gave me a lot of self-esteem. And that self-esteem started bleeding over into so many other areas of my life. Mm-hmm. And that is such a huge awareness that I've gained in this last kind of reflection cycle, New Year's resolution 2025, 2026 is if I spend more time in one aspect, maybe it's diet, maybe it's health, maybe it's reading, and build my confidence there, it spills over. And that's just, when you were talking about that just now, it just brought that to mind.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's about these small habits, and each habit action is a vote for the person that you're becoming. Mm-hmm. I really like that in Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, she talks about that. And she talks about how we ask the wrong question with kids. We ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, most kids learn of, teacher, doctor, nurse, fireman, right? The vocabulary is somewhat limited, right? And we don't even know the job titles that will be available to us in the next 5-10 years, right? But she says we need to be asking, like, who do you want to become, right? What kind of person do you want to become? And you can apply that to so many different professions, right? So oftentimes people tie their sense of identity to, I'm in private equity. Well, what happens when you get let go or you get fired? Is your worth somehow diminished? And people really wrestle with that, and for good reason, especially in our culture. That's a big piece of identity, and so we can't get too tied to title, because we have to feel rooted inside that we are worthy with or without that job, right? And that does take some internal work. And when you operate from a place of I'm enough with or without the job, that energy you show up with in an interview, it's a totally different energy than, I don't know who I am, or I might not be enough, or right.
Yes. And I can really relate to that. I used to work in the oil and gas industry, and when I was making a career change, some of the decisions that I was making on the role I was going to take had nothing to do with what I really wanted to do or what was aligned with my values. It had more to do with what would people think of me in that role. And a part of me has realized, I think I made a decision coming from that place. And when I got into that situation, then it wasn't quite the right decision, because I made it for this external, like, how's it going to look if I go from here to there? And that drove a bit of the decision. And I learned from that now, but I can totally relate to that. And that actually brings me to another question I had for you is, when someone's making a career change, we've talked a little bit about mindfulness, self-awareness, connecting with identity. What's some of the biggest mistakes you see in that process?
Yeah. Well, and maybe it ties back to our conversation about thinking about strategy. At this point, anyone can go on to ChatGPT or Claude and get support on their resume, right? We can get information from books, but people come to me when they're really feeling kind of internally stuck with maybe they're not aware of the limiting beliefs and some of the dysregulation they're experiencing. They're feeling very overwhelmed, paralyzed. I don't want to make a wrong step. So some of those kind of thought patterns that are holding them back from taking action is really when people come to me. I think there's all sorts of thoughts, whether it's kind of all or nothing thinking, right? I didn't get accepted for this job, so no one will ever hire me, right? Or assuming that people won't want to do an informational interview, right? A lot of times people kind of assume in their minds what's possible and what's not. So, I think, it can be a lot of these internal stories and narratives that I wouldn't say they're wrong, but they're data. And so we slow things down. We get curious about, well, what's that story? And how do you imagine it's trying to serve you? It's innocent. I always like to say that the mind is innocent. It's trying to protect you. And maybe it served you in the past. If I don't apply for that job, then I may not face rejection, or I may not face success. And if I'm successful and I make more money than my partner, or I have to move, like change is a big thing. So our mind is smart. It's trying to protect us. But I think if we can recognize that, there's work to be done, we can get freed up inside and move forward more authentically.
I love that. And it brings to mind the space of public speaking, because there's so much fear, and I think it's a trope, and I don't know if it's fully true anymore, but the biggest fear in the world is the fear of public speaking. And similar to being on the job hunt and experiencing change, there's that rejection of being on stage or whatever it is. And I'm curious, from your perspective and your experience, you talked a little bit about some of that internal work, but have you worked with clients afraid of public speaking? What's underneath that fear? And what advice, or maybe this is a good question, what advice would you give to someone who is really afraid to get on stage and public speak and it's holding them back in some way?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would just validate their feelings, right? I think a lot of times people judge themselves. Why am I so afraid? Or this shouldn't be hard, right? And so they're already uncomfortable, but then they create more tension internally by judging themselves for having those thoughts or feelings. So I would say it makes sense. That's normal, and then, that can help regulate someone's nervous system. As you're compassionate towards yourself, it's okay for me to feel afraid. I'm safe, and this is something new, right? Just the way that you would talk to a child, an innocent child that was just venting and saying, I'm scared, I don't want to do this, right? You wouldn't say, just get out there and go do it anyway. You'd say, yeah, like, this is a big deal. This is something new. Like, what do you need right now? Or, let me hold your hand. Let's get up there together and practice, right? So, I think teaching people tools and ways to talk to themselves and coach themselves through that. And also forgiving themselves for any misunderstandings that they've bought into, right? I'm not good enough if I make a mistake versus I'm going to try my best. And one mess up doesn't identify who I am. So I think really coaching people and understanding, being self-aware on what am I telling myself? What's another way to compassionately reframe that so that my body can feel safe? We have to establish internal safety first, right? It doesn't belong to the audience or out there. We have to insource that. We have to give that to ourselves so that we can feel whole and grounded when we are going outside our comfort zones.
One of the things I typically recommend, and I skip a lot of those steps, is Toastmasters. It's a great place to go and practice and be that experimental playground. And I think there's a lot of aspects in Toastmasters that I think intentionally are there, but we don't always talk about it. Like, if you ever go to a Toastmasters meeting, there's a ton of clapping. Like, literally anyone says anything and you're clapping, and it's building that safe space and positive reinforcement. And I had a good friend of mine who joined Toastmasters about a year ago, and she's a self-proclaimed introvert. And we were texting because right now we're in Toastmasters contest season, and it's a really big deal. It's like all the best speakers in the Southwest are competing to be the best and ultimately become the Toastmaster international speaker. And she, a year ago, was very introverted, and she gave a speech impromptu last week, and I was just texting her about something else, and she said, "Who am I? Like, who is this person?" That I was like, "How did that feel this time? Like, you didn't prepare, you last minute signed up the night before." And the amount of growth and all of that she did was amazing. And a lot of it, I think, she even surprised herself on the change. And obviously there was a lot in Toastmasters, but I think she was also doing the internal work and like challenging herself and saying, this is a safe space. So it was so cool to have that experience recently.
I love that. Well, and I love the clapping. It's like, how do we internally clap for ourselves? Our minds oftentimes go to the things that we've messed up on, but do we also count and reflect on what went really well, right? What are the wins? A lot of the coaching work that I do with clients is what's been going well? What's a win this week? Because the mind is wired for negativity bias. What's not going well? To protect ourselves. But we actually have to really consciously, deliberately see what is going well and make sure we put that into the bank account of a sense of self and worthiness, right?
When I first started working with you and being around your space, you're always like, what's a win? And initially I was like, this is so annoying. Like, there's not always a win. But to your point, the mind is wired for survival. And just like getting on stage, there's a fear there. It's wired for survival and community, and they're going to laugh at me, and there's huge rejection there. So it's not so. But after knowing you for a year now, I'm like, no, that is important. And you really need to think about the positive things that are going on, because your mind's going to default to negative just to protect you. It's just survival mechanism.
Yeah.
And speaking of, so often people have one bad experience when they're on stage or public speaking. In fact, one of my, I'll say, co-editor producers, Matt, he was on the podcast, and he talked about overcoming a stutter, and he had one experience in second grade where he got laughed at. And then for the next 20 years, he didn't public speak, and that really held him back in so many places, in school and work and different things. And now he's trying and working through overcoming that. So what does that bring up for you, that those stories of people progressing, but also getting stuck through one bad experience?
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's just part of the human experience, right? Some experiences, somehow the mind latches onto them, and sometimes again creates stories that are not helpful to us about who we are. So that one experience in second grade, if there was a story, an innocent story that defined him, like, I am not a good public speaker, or people won't support me if I'm speaking out loud, right? And that becomes kind of part of his psyche and his identity, then of course he's not going to put himself out there, right? But if in the moment, and he's second grader, and obviously it takes a lot of emotional maturity to kind of walk yourself through this, or maybe a parent might have explained, I'm really sorry to hear that happen. Sounds like that was really hard. This is just a data point. This is a moment in time. This does not define you, right? And encourages them to try again, right? They are probably going to move through that in a different way than allowing it to stop them in experimenting and playing and seeing if they can get better. The reality is no one's born a public speaker. No one is, born a banker. We all have to learn. And so if you give yourself permission to make mistakes or fail, you're going to at some point master whatever you're really putting time and energy into.
Mm-hmm. And I think I often find that the things that people are most afraid to share are the things that people are most intrigued to learn about. So when people make mistakes, or that particular guy, he has a stutter, but I think that endeared the whole audience.
Yes.
In fact, he won the latest Toastmaster. He won the current level of competition. And I think it's like we all have felt less than, and we're always hiding parts of ourselves, but sometimes that's where the deepest connection is.
Exactly.
Which has just been my learning over and over in this public speaking space, and what makes me really passionate about speaking about this area.
Yeah, I love that. We want a sense of connection, and to be human is to not be perfect, and we have to accept that. And so if the goal is perfect, it's not really relatable, honestly, right? We're striving to be better, but it really helps people resonate. Like, I'm not alone. Like, I get that, right? It's very humbling for me right now. I think I've shared I'm taking guitar lessons, and I'm really not good. I mean, I can give you jingle bells right now. If you need jingle bells, I got you all day. But it's very humbling. I'm not good at it, right? And I make lots of mistakes when I'm practicing. It's not pretty, but there are moments where it seems to click and then I keep going. But right now I'm not good at it. But it's good brain training to stay with something, to move through the hard, right? And to regulate my nervous system when I get frustrated or I get overwhelmed or I don't want to practice, right? We all have to go through that in learning a sport, in any skill, and certainly public speaking.
Yes, I think I am going through that now with editing, because I'm editing this podcast and I'm learning so many different things about how to use Premiere and Riverside and CapCut, all these different tools. And I've hit that wall so many times where I get so frustrated. I'm going to throw the computer out the window, and then I'm like, pause. Okay, let me maybe take a little course. And then the momentum builds and I get excited about what I'm doing. Yes. And then you get stuck again. You're like, oh, this is taking too long. And I've definitely been going through that. But back to that comment around self-esteem, it's like once I edited and published my first podcast, which, by the way, the one's coming out in 2026. I was going to say 2024. Oh my gosh. 2026 I've edited. And so they're a little crunchy and funky in some spots. I don't know, listeners, if you notice, but it's a learning process. And I keep telling myself, don't worry about it being perfect. Just do it. And the next one will be even better. And so I feel really proud, and you'll probably see a few more episodes between now and when we post this. But go back to the first one I published in January, and then look at this one now, and it's just so exciting in myself to see that growth.
Yeah, and that's inspiring for anyone else who wants to start podcasting or start anything, right? It's so easy to compare ourselves to someone's day 100 when we're at day 1, but it's not really a fair comparison. So I love that you're reflecting on, wow, I've come a really far way, and that's something to celebrate, and I don't need to compare it to somebody else who's been in this space for 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I'm curious, we started the conversation talking about self-awareness and that internal mindfulness, and I wanted to just see if there was an overlap. We've been talking about communication and public speaking. If you can share any insights you have on knowing who you are and knowing what you value, how can that help you as a communicator? Mm-hmm. Are those things linked?
Yeah, for sure. I think values are an anchor. It ties you to your mission or cause, right? If you're speaking about, overcoming, I don't know, I'm going to make something up, cancer or childhood abuse or whatever it may be, right? If you get focused on, I need to present, I need to perform, what are they going to think about me? How will I be seen? Right? When we're focused on like being seen and possibly being judged, we're not really tied to our values of, I want to be really honest and clear and thoughtful about sharing a message that's important to me because I want to be a part of solving this problem in the world. I don't want any other kids to go through something as difficult as I did, and I want them to know XYZ, right? Like that comes in your body in a different place, right? From your heart and from your gut versus the spiraling, ruminating mind of what if, and they're going to think, right? So you're really focused on being the best you can for others and for your mission, right? So recognizing my value is growth, or my value is kindness or education in this area. It really ties you back to that mission and what you value most, and makes it less about you and who you are and are you enough.
I can so relate to that. And when you were talking, it got me thinking about not just the public speaking space or the career change, but just the professional environment where, say you're a manager, or even if you're not a manager, a peer, and you're giving difficult feedback to a person you're working with, I would always ground myself in, this is about growth. This is about the team, and not, oh, you're not doing this and I'm not trying to make you feel bad. It was like, how do I want to show up to make sure that this person feels that I care about their growth, even if it's a difficult conversation? And it's not always easy. If you're telling someone they're not meeting expectations or whatever, it's difficult. But when I put myself in that mindset, my value of growth, then it really helps.
Yeah, I love that.
I want to pivot the conversation, and I may edit this out, but it was just on my mind. And I'm going to edit the part about me editing it out if we keep it. So, but this, and I might edit out because it's just from the career design program. So anyway, here we go.
Whatever you want to do. Yeah.
So last week at the career design, or let's see, how do I want to say this so I could potentially use it? Anyway, I'll just say it. It's probably going to get edited out. Anyway, last week we were in the career design program and people were sharing how they were experiencing their work environments and where their coworkers or bosses were giving them signals of, they were asking questions. This is what I want out of the job. And people were saying yes or no. And it was really interesting to me how you were responding to those individuals, because it was all about what they were learning from the information and what they had under their control. And the reason why it was interesting to me is when they were sharing their stories, I was hearing bias. I was hearing like, oh, I wonder if a man had said XYZ, I want to learn more, I want to expand my scope, or I want to do this, if the manager would have had the same. Like, I was going somewhere totally different. And I was just curious. I don't know if you recall this part of the conversation from that meeting, but it was just so interesting to me, because I was like, I think there's some bias in this workplace and they're not, treating you equally or whatever. So just curious if you remember that part of the conversation or what was coming up for you and why you went. And I don't remember it exactly now, but you just went a totally different direction than I was expecting.
Yeah. Well, and it's a different position perhaps as a coach versus as a friend, right? Maybe a friend is telling me and I'm like, that's so terrible. And, and I definitely want to acknowledge someone's pain in it and their experience. I think when I'm in a coaching capacity, I want to be helpful to my client. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy for us to become really in the weeds or almost a little bit indulgent in the pain of the situation. And while it's really important to feel that, it's also important to recognize what you can do next, right? Because we can spiral in the hard and we can kind of name call and, well, it sounds like your manager's awful, and we can go there, right? And, so what, right? So I think it's important to recognize the difficulty and to say, okay, this is data and information. Whether it's fact or not, I mean, there's two stories. The manager could be perfectly lovely, and this is how this person is reacting. But the reality is that this is their truth. This is the experience they're having. And so with that information and that data, what do we want to do about it? And what can you do about it? What's in your control, right? So if we think about taking action from a place of that we uncouple the emotion from it, right? We can keep it a little less personal, right? So when I uncouple basically all the stories of I'm not good enough, they don't like me, they want me to do, right? Then it allows me to really just look at what is this about business? What is this about work? Versus a lot of times when we get triggered, it's about our stuff, right? And so we can get sucked into it, or we can also uncouple the emotion from it and think about, if I'm going to be professional and it not be about me, how can I move the ball forward?
That's profound. Like what you said about not being about me. And do you find yourself, or are you just very experienced now? Like, do you have a method to get yourself out of that emotion and that indulging in the stories, or I don't know, how does that work for you? Because I feel like that's a good skill for me to have.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean like for myself or with clients?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Well, sure. I get triggered all the time. I'm human too. And I've got my own, stories that are unhealed within myself. So I try to pay attention to where I feel that in my body. Like I'm feeling like my throat's tight, or I'm feeling a pit in my stomach. And that's kind of like a little bit of a flag to like, let's slow down. Let's get curious. All of a sudden I'm noticing that, I'm feeling very warm, right? These can be signals that something has shifted for us. And so if I can slow down, maybe I say, you know what, I need to use the restroom for a moment, or I take some deep breaths to slow it down. It can help make sure that you're using the logic part of your brain and not just the emotional center, the amygdala, to act from, right? To make sure that I'm going to say and do things that are in alignment with my values, and not just from I'm angry, or I'm upset, right? So I try to pay attention to the cues in my own body. I try to help clients notice what's happening. You notice that you started raising your voice. Okay, so what can we do when you notice that, right? How can we do a lot of that emotional regulation inside before you take that next step, so that you can act in integrity with your values, right? So it's a work in progress. It might be talking to a coach or a therapist, or talking to a friend, and creating some space so that you can see the situation in a way that's going to help you be productive and get what you need and move forward.
I think that takes me back to the beginning of this conversation about yoga and mindfulness and just being aware, because I think for myself, feeling those emotions and noticing, and then taking that beat versus just going right into, maybe I'm overwhelmed because I've got a million things to do and I just feel like, I was stuck. But instead, feel overwhelmed, notice it, take a break, and then see where I'm at.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's where like emotional vocabulary, emotional intelligence can identify what's happening inside of me right now. And sometimes we just act. I don't know. I was so angry. I just slammed the door and I left. I don't even know what I was thinking. I don't even know what I was feeling, right? So we really have to slow it down and get curious, so that, again, we can take action that's in alignment with our values.
Nice. I have one last question for you, a closing reflection. If there was one thing or mindset shift that you would ask people, or that you would recommend people to do if they needed to communicate more clearly, or just walk through a job change or career change, what would you ask them to think about or reflect on? Mm-hmm. What's one important mindset shift that you found very helpful when people are moving through those spaces?
Yeah. I really love the exploration phase of career redesign or reinvention, because I think a lot of times we take action from what we think we should do. And maybe that's outside influences, well-meaning parents or society. You should do this, or you could do this. But I really like to help people slow down and get curious about, what do I want, right? If you could have the dream job, if you could be wildly successful, if you knew you couldn't fail at something, what would you go for? What lights you up? So using the body to really help, notice, I'm leaning forward in my chair as I talk about this. I'm smiling as I talk about, these types of books that I read, or these types of articles that I, regularly consume, right? There are lots of data points that help us notice where we light up, where we get into a sense of flow. So, helping people operate from that place of feeling energized is, I think, something that we don't always tap into, but can help you make sure that you're choosing something that really is in alignment with who you are, instead of like, I should do this, or I could do this, and then just landing another job that, like, well, maybe you have the skills, but maybe you don't actually feel excited using those skills. You can be really good at something and not enjoy it. So really getting curious about, what is it that I know that I enjoy, or I've enjoyed in the past, can help you make sure you're making decisions that are really good for you.
Thank you. This conversation has been so great. There's so many little nuggets I'm trying to keep track of, but then I'm like, thank goodness for the recording, because I don't have to. It's all there. Yeah. So I appreciate that. Are you ready for the rapid fire?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Here we go.
Here we go. And they don't have to be that rapid.
Okay.
But what book, article, or podcast has inspired you recently?
Yes. Well, I first listened to a podcast Mel Robbins interviewed, I think his name's James Doty, and he wrote the book, The Magic of Manifestation, like the neuroscience behind manifesting. And just his story is really incredible, kind of where he comes from, grew up in poverty, kind of a broken home situation, really difficult. And a woman who was in a magic shop essentially down the road started to teach him about mindfulness and manifestation and using his mind to visualize what he wanted and kind of change the course of his life. So really interesting book I'm reading through right now.
Thanks. We'll put that in the show notes.
Okay.
We are a public speaking podcast. So what is your biggest public speaking pet peeve? Oh. What do you wish speakers would stop doing?
You know what? I have heard people speak, and at the beginning, I don't like when people are really, I think there's a difference between being funny and a little self-deprecating versus almost throwing themselves under the bus when they start, right? Like, oh, I'll make it fast so you can go home, or this is not going to be that good, or that is always painful. I'm always like, no, don't start that way, and I think they're just trying to maybe humanize themselves and maybe help bring expectations down. But, for me as a listener, I'm always like, no, I'm excited. I'm cheering for you. And, so anyway, that's a pet peeve of mine.
Oh, that's mine too. In fact, my previous co-host, Sharpen, and I did a podcast on 10 things not to do when starting your speech, and that's definitely one of them. And that should be coming out in a couple weeks, although this will be out after
I'll have to listen to that, yeah.
Yes, that's such a good one. It's so true. Like, just get to the point. Like, you have something to say it.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I agree so much. Okay, what's your go-to way to collaborate? Do you like in person, email, Zoom, Teams, Slack? What's your...
Yeah. I love in person. I mean, since the pandemic, I've been online with clients, which is great. I used to have an office back in the DC area, and I met with people in person. I really love being in person, so when that's possible, that's great. But otherwise, Zoom is good. I like being able to see a face and a name and just more of the human connection, but happy to have someone ping me on LinkedIn or Instagram, email, so happy to connect in any way.
Yes. Love it. Okay. What was your last major public speaking gig, and what was one thing you took away or learned from it?
Ooh. Let's see. Well, over the last 6 months, and so we're reaching the tail end, I've been doing a series for a nonprofit called 0 to 3, and they provide education and programs for children and toddlers ages 0 to 3 so that they can get an early start on, good on their lives. And but I've been doing trainings in the company for employees on self-care, stress management, because especially working in a nonprofit, oftentimes you're very dedicated to the mission and you want to put in as many hours as you can. But oftentimes there can be a cost to that. Burnout, if you're not doing well, you're not going to serve your organization to your fullest capacity. So even just teaching and training, I've been doing that for this company. They've got employees all over the U.S., so we've been on Zoom, and we've been doing a series over the last 6 months. So that's been a fun one. And a takeaway, I think at the end of the day, people just want to be human and connect. These groups, people have unmuted themselves. We've done some breakout rooms, and people just come alive when they can talk to each other and share. I think it's harder, especially being in more of a remote world, to feel like, we don't have the water cooler talk. So we get into a meeting and we're talking about the meeting versus let's talk about who we are as people, as employees. What do we care about? How do we work better together? So that's been insightful in connecting with that organization.
Nice. One thing I always pay attention to on Zoom is in a meeting, how many people are muted or not muted? And is it one of those meetings where it's like everyone's muted? And of course, if there's distractions in the background, but you can always tell the vibe of a meeting if everyone's like off mute and kind of laughing and not afraid to interrupt, or everyone's on mute and like half the cameras are off. And it's such a interesting, I always like to create spaces where people are like, turn off, everyone's mute is off and everyone's just kind of popcorning when they need to versus the very like Zoom style of everyone on mute.
Yeah.
So, okay. What's one piece of advice you'd give to new public speakers?
Oh, goodness. I think I would just say, be compassionate and gentle with yourself. I don't mean, I think sometimes when people hear compassion or being gentle, it's like, well, letting yourself off the hook. Like if I don't do a good job, well, like you don't have to do this, or, don't worry about pushing yourself into something that's uncomfortable. But being compassionate is being kind to yourself. Again, just the way that you would with a friend. So noticing the stories that are coming up and be gentle with yourself and ask yourself, is that really true? Do I know that I'll never be good at public speaking? Or is that just an innocent misunderstanding? And I can remind myself that practice makes things better, right? And so I think it's really that attitude of inner kindness that helps people then continue to move forward and improve.
Thank you. So good. So if people wanted to find you, reach out, connect, or follow your journey, what's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah. Thanks so much. So happy to connect with anyone. I'm on Instagram I'm sure you'll put this in the show notes. You can find me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. You can find me on my website, CaitlinMagidson.com. And reach out by email. Happy to connect. I think there's some other podcasts I've been in, if you want to listen, but always happy to meet new people.
Great. I will put those in the show notes because I just learned how to do that.
Okay. Yay.
This podcast is a work in progress. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to hear more, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, we encourage you to speak Arizona.